YNABers, my name is Jesse Meekum. This is podcast number 360 for YNAB, where we teach you 4 rules to help you stop living paycheck to paycheck, get out of debt, and save more money. If you recall, we are going back to the basics with these several episodes. We've talked about your priorities, and how key they are. You've got to make sure you're clear on your priorities. Then we talked about giving every dollar a job, which is our first rule. You must be giving every single one of your dollars a job. Those jobs are your priorities. You need to be able to rank your priorities and decide what's most important and what you can let slide. Now, we used the analogy of the afternoon where you had 3 hours to spend, and you realized that you also wanted to read a novel, so you kind of juggled. But it was up to you to essentially decide how to spend those 3 hours as they were fought over between your competing priorities of food prep, weeding the garden, and running. And then having that sneaky little one come in where you wanted to read a novel that your friend had recommended. Now, sometimes, in order to accomplish something, an hour or even 3 hours simply isn't enough. Sometimes you leave so many hours until the very last minute. And you've been there. Your parents and your teachers perhaps told you not to procrastinate. I know I've mentioned that once or twice to my oldest, but he still does, and we still do. Imagine you're getting ready for a visit from your in-laws, and the house needs to be cleaned, but you've left it all for the day before. So you spend all day doing it. You're having to scramble. You don't have time for anything else, and you end up ordering takeout at the last minute for dinner, and because you just didn't have time, and that's not how you imagine spending your money that you'd budgeted towards restaurants anyway. But the job gets done. It's perhaps not the best cleaning you've ever done, and you just about pulled out your hair. You were probably mean to the kids while this was all happening, and that's not fair. So you didn't plan. You didn't break up that job of cleaning the whole house in preparation for guests. You didn't break it up into manageable pieces. And imagine if that wasn't strong enough for you, imagine trying to finish all of that in the very last second, right? But if you had taken an hour on Monday and you'd cleaned the guest room, there's no problem, no stress. It feels very normal. It doesn't even register on your stress scale. And then on Tuesday you'd spent 2 hours maybe washing the floors, vacuuming. 2 hours is a big chunk of time especially for vacuuming, but it feels still manageable. What'd you do today? Well, I did do some pretty heavy duty vacuuming, but I also knocked out these other things and the day was productive. And had time to squeeze in Great British Baking Show to make it really a good day. So then Wednesday, you'd spend just an hour cleaning all the school projects and stacks of mail off the dining room table that you only ever use maybe when the in-laws visit. So you still have time for an extra long run, because remember, running was one of those priorities we talked about. You squeezed in the time for the running and preparation. So all of this kind of pre-preparation, which is a little bit redundant, this made Thursday, the day before your in-laws arrive, almost relaxing. You had to grocery shop and you had to get the kitchen squared up. And this was a big, maybe took 2.5 hours, but it felt good knowing that all of your other tasks had been completed. And you've essentially budgeted your time. You guys know where I'm going with this. You smoothed out that peak craziness that happens when you shove all this stuff to the very end, to that deadline, and you avoided the stress by not trying to find that one big chunk of elusive time that is never actually there that we all think will be there. That one day that will be completely empty with nothing on the calendar. So, because when you think about it, preparing for this in-law visit isn't about Friday or about Thursday. It's a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday task. And we often don't think of our time this way. This is why we get stuck, with deadlines looming. Instead, we fool ourselves. We don't embrace the fact that there are true demands on our time now for things that are down the road. And when you make progress now on tasks that need to be done later, you've flipped this whole problem around. And you've used your time in ways that are actually more in line with your needs, your true needs. By planning ahead, you've smoothed out those ups and downs, and your stress level is at this nice, even little low hum that lets you know you're alive, and you sleep better at night. So that whole analogy obviously ties right into your finances because you can feel the same way. Imagine never dreading that your in-laws come over. Or, said a better way, because that didn't sound very nice, imagine never dreading the arrival of a big bill. Maybe your father-in-law's name is Bill, and this is really hitting home for you. So when you embrace your true expenses, you can budget now for future needs. It's like a down payment on larger, less frequent expenses. You say you'll set aside money for your annual insurance premium, but how often are you caught by a surprise? Or, hey, didn't we just have the holidays with all that spending, right? With some of the money you have now, some of the time you have now, right? You can prepare for next winter's big heating bills or next summer's vacation. And you know these things are coming. You know the in-laws are coming. And you have to be ready, or she'll make some comment. I'm just kidding, but I'm lobbing softballs to myself, so I have to swing. Instead of scrambling to pay a massive orthodontist bill, because there are no small orthodontist bills, no offense to orthodontists, perhaps, instead of paying that all at once, the money will be there just waiting for the bill to come in, and there's no stress about where that money will come from because you've set it aside each month. It's like you're on payment plans with yourself. Now, not everything in life is predictable, but rule 2, where we're embracing this idea of true expenses, that you really do have the obligation of prepping for the in-laws. You really do have the obligation of paying for that life insurance premium, those property taxes, that summer vacation, those high winter heating bills. They're all pretty easy to get your head around when they're predictable, but a lot of stuff is just unpredictable. Car repairs, home repairs, medical bills, right? They just happen. And it's not a surprise that they happen, but we all act like we will be completely healthy. We act like the cars will run forever, that the tires will never wear down. You just don't know exactly when these things will happen, but you know they will. So when you put money aside, even for those where you don't know the amount, they're not nearly as stressful later. And if you're wondering if that's true, let me give you this little test. Let's say you don't know how much you're going to have to pay for the next car repair because you don't know how much the car repair will be. I just said the same thing twice in 2 different ways. But you're saying, Jesse, because I don't know the amount, I'm not going to save for it. And I say, okay, my approach would be the same assumption that I don't know the amount, but I'm also going to adopt the rule that more dollars are more than fewer dollars. And I'm going to say that's pretty true most of the time. So in this instance, if I had set aside against an unknown eventuality like any kind of car repair, and I said, well, I'm going to set aside $200 against this amount of which I do not know the final number. And you're going to say, I don't know the final number, therefore it is fruitless to set aside any money. And then we both get hit with a transmission bill or something else. I'm not a car guy. The car breaks. There you go. And the mechanic, trustworthy mechanic, comes to us and says, the bill is $800. You now have to come up with $800. I now have to come up with $600. And in my world, it is easier to come up with $600 than $800. Therefore, I think it is true that if I put more money aside, I will have more money later for things that eventually will happen. Now, my brain just melted a little bit. Hopefully yours didn't, especially if you're driving. But that's the idea. Even though you don't know the amount, still throw something onto the pile. And in a year and a half, when you accidentally have $6,000 saved, that would be pretty fast, actually. In 3 years, when you accidentally have $6,000 saved for your car that's worth $4,000, well, then make an adjustment. But until then, let's not pretend that cars can just run infinitely long without breaking down. Not yet, at least. I look forward to the day. So that was a little bit of a side note, but I don't like when people say I'm not going to save because I don't know the amount. We know the amount will be greater than zero, so we know you should save greater than zero toward it. Now, one more little side note. Don't set aside for the cost of toothpaste. I call it toothpasting, and I don't know if in Urban Dictionary that's actually something, so don't look it up, but I've always called it toothpasting in my mind. and on podcasts apparently. And it means that a tube of toothpaste costs, I don't know. I literally don't look at the price when we buy it. I think we buy it in Costco, so it comes in from Costco, so it comes in a vat. Actually, 2 separate barrels that are shrink wrapped onto a pallet, and then they just drop the pallet off on our driveway. And I cut off the shrink wrap, and then I tilt the vats onto their sides, and we just roll them around to the other side of the house, where I then store it in our toothpaste storage room. And we work through that toothpaste slowly over time. So we buy it in bulk, and I'm not sure of the price. But let's say a tube of toothpaste costs $1. I don't want to see you setting aside, 1/12 of $1 every year for that annual outlay of toothpaste. That doesn't seem right. So there's some fine line here that's going to feel pretty obvious for you as you work your budget. This is the key with Rule 2. You've got to look ahead and think about those obligations you actually have. If there's anything you take away from this, it is this: the in-laws are coming. You have to be ready for them. Don't try and clean the house all at one time, and don't try and save for that big holiday bill all at one time. You and I both know you just can't do it. Embrace your true expenses, and you even out those ups and downs that happen, because that's how money flows out of your life. It doesn't flow out evenly, and you've got to make sure that you recognize that, and you set aside evenly so that you can create what actually looks like a very stable situation. Ends up where you just have that low hum, you're barely alive stress level, and that's what we want. Until next time, follow YNAB's 4 rules, and you will win financially. You've never budgeted like this.